Thomas and Henry stared at the new engine with excitement and admiration. The Fat Controller had recently brought a tender engine from Lancashire. He had 6 wheels that were the same size as Thomas, but smaller than Gordon's, with 2 small wheels at the front. The engine didn't look pleased to be on the railway, but slightly perked up when the Fat Controller arrived. "Here is James," he said grandly. "He will help Edward with the goods work on my railway. Please make him feel welcome." The Fat Controller tipped his hat and walked away. "Welcome to Sodor, James," said Thomas. "We do hope you enjoy your time here," added Henry. James just looked around and sighed. "Not much of a yard," he grumbled, "but it'll do." That statement alone made Thomas and Henry suspect that they weren't going to get on with James straight away. At first, James worked very hard on the Fat Controller's railway. He shunted trucks, although he couldn't stand the sight of them, but was more than happy whenever he was given coaches. But the engine soon learned that James had a very boastful attitude, which came and went when they least expected it. One evening, James was in the shed, boasting with pride. "The Fat Controller's going to get me repainted," he scoffed. "Just imagine how splendid I'll be." "You're not splendid as you are now," grunted Gordon. "I can't understand why you think you're so above everyone." "Pah!" scoffed James. "My friends on the Lancashire Railway thought I was fantastic. I was the best shunter up there." "Well, you're not there now," grumbled Gordon. "You're here, and here you will stay. Maybe the Fat Controller should keep you in your current colours until you learn to respect our railway and our rules." James gritted his teeth, but for once the other engines agreed with Gordon. Eventually, the conversation died down and the engines went to sleep. A few weeks later, James returned from the works. He was now painted in a splendid red coat with brass stripes across his boiler and black lining across his tender. James now had the number 5, which he was quite proud of. However, James's new coat made him more boasted and conceited than ever. It eventually got on the nerves of the other engines. "You don't seem to care about anyone but yourself, do you?" asked Edward one day. "It's always self-image with you, James." "Look who's talking, Grandpa," huffed James. "You can't even move about as much as you did before." "Leave Edward alone," snapped Thomas. "Who do you think you are, talking to him like that?" "I'll go get dragged behind Gordon's Express again, shrimp," huffed James. "Don't tell me what to do." "That attitude of yours is going to get the better of you some day," hissed Edward. "I'd be careful if I were you." James rolled his eyes and hurried out of the shed. "His paintwork matches his temper. Hot and fiery," grumbled Thomas. Edward had to agree. During the weeks that followed, Henry was bricked up in a tunnel, as he refused to come out because of the rain. James found himself doing Henry's work as well as his own, whether it was goods or passengers. As James worked day after day until Henry came out of the tunnel, a design flaw started to take shape. James had not told anyone, not even the Fat Controller, that his brake blocks were made of wood. If he overworked himself, they would smoke up, almost at the danger of catching fire. James did work hard and tried his best not to expose this design flaw, but he knew it would be a matter of time before the other engines picked up on it. At long last, Henry was allowed out of the tunnel, and James thought he could go back to doing just his work. But he was wrong. During the busy summer season, James discovered he had more work than he bargained for. He was waiting at the platform with a passenger train when Thomas bustled in. "You know, I'd love to see the world," said Thomas. "Good for you," grumbled James. "Don't you ever dream of anything?" asked Thomas. trying to liven the conversation. "I dreamed that I wasn't pestered by little tank engines who've got ideas above their station," snapped James. It was lucky for him that the guard blew his whistle and James fussed away. Thomas grunted and went back to work. But the troublesome trucks, who often delight in mischief on the railway, noticed that James's brake blocks were getting worse. Smoke was wisping out of his wheels, causing the trucks to beam brightly. They had a devious plan that James was soon going to find out about. A few days later, James had marshalled a long line of trucks to take to the harbour on Edward's branch line. He was in a foul temper. He waited for the guard's whistle, but the trucks were getting agitated.
"Red monster, can't we move? Red monster, can't we move?"
they chattered. "Shut it!" growled James, and bumped the trucks hard. This was enough for them to bear. Without warning, they all surged forward, catching James unawares. Then there was trouble. The resulting bump caused James's brake blocks to spark, and then catch fire. James was horrified as he was speeding down the line with his wheels wisping with smoke all around them. "Help! Help!" he wailed. The trucks didn't care. They pushed James through the yard where Thomas was shunting. He stared in bewilderment as the goods train came rushing in much too fast and I bet you know what happens next, don't you?